a conservative, and I think this is so important, because the forces that are opposed to our freedoms want to deny us our history. You know, a true conservative will not argue that somehow we are morally superior to those who have gone before us. This is a terrible tendency. I'd be very interested in your views on this, to say we know better than those people who went before us. I actually think future generations may judge us very harshly indeed.
Well, of course. I mean, the progressives of tomorrow are going to hate the progressives of today. That's the point.
That's an interesting insight.
Well, but that's the point. The progressives of tomorrow, I mean, just really, we can do a very simple version of this, would be that Barack Obama, who was once a progressive hero, in many ways is actually irrelevant to the left right now. He's been speaking out against wokeism lately, against identity politics, and they're pretty much ignoring him. Now, Barack Obama ran against gay marriage the first time that he was running for president. He was against gay marriage. He was for traditional marriage. Now, that sounds like some sort of evil, scary conservative belief. So the progressives of tomorrow that want to take down the statues and the monuments that we have of our forefathers, Barack Obama's library is being built, I think right now in Chicago. What do you think a progressive of 2030, of 2040 is going to say? They're going to say, wait a minute. We have a library in Chicago of a man who ran against gay marriage. Yeah. And that sort of erasure of history is incredible. It's disingenuous, but it's incredibly dangerous, because the idea that we all right now have become so enlightened that we can do everything, accomplish everything that the people before us couldn't. I don't think I'm much better of a person. I don't think I'm a better person than my father. I don't think I'm a better person than my grandfather or my great-grandfather. Now, or before that, and I didn't know all these people, obviously, and we all do different things. But do I somehow own a greater truth? And I'm trying to create the best world that I can here, and it starts by creating something individually that I believe in. But I will not do that at the expense of everyone before me. So that's why progress just for the sake of progress actually isn't progress. It's regression, actually. I mean that seems so obvious to me. But what you said about conservatism and classical liberalism, I think is interesting, because we have here in the United States what I would say the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and certainly the Bill of Rights, I think are the greatest man-made written documents about how to govern a society. We had unalienable rights, God-given rights, and the government is not giving you those rights. The government's protecting those rights. That's a huge difference. That is a huge difference. The government did not give me freedom. It will protect my freedom. I was born free first because there was something unique about being a human. That is incredibly powerful. And if we don't stop to think what that means, well, then of course we're going to outsource everything to government. If you don't think for a moment, if you think for a second, let's say, the government gave you freedom, well, then government can give you anything and it can take anything away.
That's right.
And that's a very dangerous place. And that's why, again, I'm so enthused that people are starting to care about this. Yeah. You know, I walk down the street sometimes here in LA, and people will just scream. Sometimes someone will be across the street, they'll see me and they'll just scream, "Hey, classical liberal." And I'll be like, whoa, I've done something pretty cool here. That's pretty great. So I'm very happy about that. But that's also a really good place for where the classical liberals and conservatives have touch points. And what I would say at this point are very, very minor disagreements. You know, I know that there's a string of classical liberals that really thank everything to the Enlightenment. They credit the Enlightenment with everything, so it doesn't have a religious context that more conservatives believe. I've actually started to come around to the conservative version of that, because I don't think the Enlightenment started with nothing. There was something below the Enlightenment too. That's a place where I would probably be pinned more as a conservative, oddly, than a classical liberal, because a lot of them just think the Enlightenment was where all of this was birthed, you know, just 300 years ago.
Well, that's a very interesting point, and it's probably one worth pursuing a little bit, because you could actually see America, even Britain, really more as a product of the massive Christian uprisings of the 1740s, 50s, and they filter through in America into the Declaration of Independence. And that very clear idea that government should be limited. It's downstream of culture, not upstream. And its job is to protect freedoms in order that government itself might be limited. So it's the very reverse of the normal way of looking at things.
Because you have to think a little bit more about it.
Yeah, that's right.
You have to think why that matters. We're here first.
So your problem, and this is an interesting one for Americans because of the interesting fact that there were two revolutions happening at the time of yours. There was a French one as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you say that Enlightenment thinking was all Enlightenment, you've got a real problem with France, because that was driven by their version of the Enlightenment, and it turned out to be anything but enlightened.
It always
It's
finds...
the reign of terror.
Well, it always strikes me as, look, is the Enlightenment probably the best period of time for human ideas to flourish in sort of just a quick burst, you know, in a couple of decades? Did the best ideas flourish really well? Yes, of course, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. There had to have been enough of human, you know, the churning through ideas, and perhaps the reformation of religion, and some people leaving religion, and some people understanding religion differently, and all of those things, right? Like that's the gestalt of humanity, all of this mix of things,
that's right.
so that the Enlightenment thinkers could get the right ideas across. So I do think that this idea, and look, this is where Jordan Peterson, I think, really made his mark, is that the underpinning of all of this and the value in the biblical stories, because he doesn't tell anyone to be religious per se, and I don't think he's religious per se, but the value that there are eternal truths that somehow got translated into these stories. If you could give me, if anyone could give me, if the best atheist that I've got in these books right here could give me a better way to organize society around that, I would love to have that conversation. I have yet to see it. And that's, I think, a really interesting point.
This is, of all the things I admire about you, is this incredible honesty, because what you're in effect saying is, in the best Enlightenment tradition, I might add, where does the evidence take you?
Yeah.
Where does the evidence take you? What other great stream of thinking has evolved into the freedoms that we enjoy today? And if you say, well, it's the Enlightenment, I say, look at France. If you say, I'll be really crude and blunt here, and people will hate me saying it, but look at two other revolutions that resulted in anything but freedom. You could say they were also partly the result of Enlightenment. Karl Marx was an Enlightenment man. And you think the Russian Revolution, you think the Maoist Revolution, did they produce freedom? No. And so, I hugely respect your honesty, because when we first met, you said, look, I'm an atheist, as I recall. I may be misjudging you. And you've been on a journey. That raises a whole lot of things. You talked about Mr. Obama a moment ago and the way in which people will judge him. Are we not allowed to go on a journey? Can't we rejoice when people go in pursuit of truth and they change and they're transformed? What happens if somebody moves from a position that is demonstrably, how can I put this, more selfish to a more enlightened and generous perspective? Are we to condemn the enlightened person because once, when they were younger, we've washed forgiveness out of the system, and now in an age of social media, we can make sure that we don't forget either. So forgiveness is gone.
Forgiveness is gone, and now it has a record. Now it has an official record that exists. So that's a really dangerous thing, right? It's one thing to say we're going to remove forgiveness from the equation. That's a bad idea for humans in general. But now to go, all these people right now that are just trying to destroy people all the time, the mob that comes for anybody who says anything outside, it's like, don't you understand? If you've put any information anywhere, which we all have now, if you've ever tweeted or posted a Facebook message or said this about Trump or this about Hillary, et cetera, it will come for you one day. So be careful, take a breath. And by the way, you know, some of this is that we're, in a weird way, we're children with technology. The idea that the phone that is in everybody's pocket right now did not exist 20 years ago. You know, I'm 43 years old. It wasn't until I was a sophomore in college, I think in 1995, that I saw the internet in color. We had some, you know, black and white version of a text thing with emails, and I didn't even understand why would I be, I remember I got to college, they said, you'll send emails to your professors, and I was like, I had no idea even what that meant. And I remember seeing the internet in color for the first time. A guy on my floor in the dorm, he was screaming that he was on the World Wide Web, and we kind of all ran in there, and it had a New York Yankees logo and a Kansas City Royals logo, and it said Yankees 3, Royals 1, and I swear on my life, I remember saying, this is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. That's what I said because I remember thinking, why wouldn't I just wait till 7 o'clock to see this on SportsCenter?
Yeah.
You know, like,
it's like Mr. IBM said, well, they might be used for one computer in the world.
There's that great quote, right? That's from like 1978. We'll all need, half a megabyte of information or something like that, right? And we're now walking around with supercomputers that are more powerful than what sent us to the moon. So I think we're adolescents playing with technology that we have no idea how much.
If you're an adolescent, I've got to tell you, I'm a babe in the woods because I'm 20 years older than you.
But there's a beauty to that, right? There's a real beauty to that. I
hadn't thought of it like that. That's very assuring.
No, but there is a beauty to it because all of us are going to feel like we're the older generation one day. There's going to be something.
I hate to tell you, it comes faster than I think.
Believe me, now I can somehow, suddenly as I've entered my 40s, I've realized how it moves faster than you think. But there's a certain beauty to being able to remember the past, but use the tools of the now. I think that's basically what you're doing, and I think that's what most good people are trying to do. They're not just magically trying to recreate a world. Not recreate. They're not trying to just create a world that they think is so much better. That's what certain set of people are doing right now. That's not how most people are. I think most people are respective. Nobody wants to look back and think, oh, my grandma was a racist because she didn't believe this or that or the other thing, or was just a person of their time, or that we should take down. I was just at Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's estate.
He kept slaves.
He kept slaves. He had an affair with at least one slave, most likely had children with her. They are incredibly honest about that, by the way, when you take the tour. And not only that, he was writing the laws that were freeing the slaves at the same time. Now, what does that tell you? Does that tell you?
He's on a journey.
He was on a journey, and we're all imperfect. And we have even for as much as we know about him, which is quite a lot because he was writing so much, we don't know what the internal tumult was. And, people get angry. It's like if you weren't an abolitionist from day one, then actually, Abraham Lincoln wasn't an abolitionist from day one. Everyone sort of operates in the world thinking people operate in the world as it is, not just in an emotional outburst of you have to do everything on day one. And that seems to be a weird place that we're veering for. That if you don't do everything the way a certain set of people want you to, the second they think of it, right? So you're okay on something, but if whatever the group think of the day is, when it decides something, if you don't move that day, congratulations, you're out too. And that's our challenge, to fight that and to show people not only can you evolve, every single person watching this right now is evolving in some way. And the idea that you would deny that is to deny yourself the one thing that makes us not animals. We have a bigger brain. We use more percentage of our brain than any other living creature on Earth. Well, why not use it?
Well, we have a moral sense as well.
And we have a moral sense, which is a great philosophical and spiritual conversation to have. And let's not forget that. Let's not act like animals, right? We've created something incredible here, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be incredible. We've got to defend it.
Thank you for watching this episode. We appreciate your support. If you value vital conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to the channel there and also click the notification bell to stay up to date with new releases.